Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1986 comedy film Back to School. Now, Back to School is one of those films that a lot of people have fond memories of, a lot of people grew up with. It's one of their favorites when it comes to 80s comedies. I didn't really grow up with this one. I didn't watch this honestly all the way through until very recently for this video. And I have to say that I had fun with this one. I enjoyed it. I was definitely entertained by it for the most part, but I wouldn't say it was one of my favorite 80s comedies. There were other 80s comedies that I enjoy more, but it was still a good time overall. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Back to School, I would like to give a special shout out to Sean for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Back to School is directed by Alan Metter. And Alan Metter, prior to this, he did some music videos for Olivia Newton-John and Rodney Dangerfield. He directed the Rappin' Rodney music video that became a hit on MTV. And after that, he did another film called Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which was a film that was basically made just to capitalize on the really popular Cyndi Lauper song. And then he decided to use his connections with Rodney to get the job of directing this film. And for whatever reason, though, this is the last time that he and Rodney worked on anything together. I think honestly was a plan for him to maybe direct Caddyshack 2, but that fell through, and the two never really worked together again. And it's a shame because, as you can see in the Rappin' Rodney video and in this film, Metter seems to have a good rapport with Rodney. He seems to definitely know how to put Rodney in the best possible light, and also how to really showcase his strengths as an actor, which he's admittedly not the best actor, but Metter realized that a lot of his charm is his charisma and his comic timing, and so he was able to come up with a plan directing wise to really emphasize those two things. That being said, I don't think the direction as a whole is anything really that incredible, but it's consistently decent overall. There really aren't a lot of moments directing wise where it's obviously poor. The framing is fine, so is the shot selection, the pans, the zooms, and so on and so forth. It really doesn't have a lot of variety or a lot of originality or uniqueness when it comes to those kind of shots. But for the kind of film that it is, simpler photography and direction isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then it just is able to focus on the comedic energy of a particular sequence, or just focus on really providing the film with the best possible springboard for its star. That being said, some of the shots do look a little low budget, little small for a film that wound up becoming one of the most successful films of 1986. And some of the shots have admittedly, I wouldn't say have aged poorly, but they just aren't really anything that special in terms of the way that they're put together. So there is this kind of samey thing that's going on in terms of the shots. But it's fine. The direction is fine for the kind of film that this is, And I definitely feel that for the most part, it is a positive as a result because it's not one of those things where the director is trying too hard and then failing or isn't trying hard enough. It's consistently uh, um, solid for what it is. Now, the screenplay by Stephen Campman, Will Porter, Peter Torkavai, and Harold Ramis, it's chock full of cliches and predictable moments. It's got love interests that don't really seem to go anywhere, or at least not any place that leaves any sort of significant impact or impression. It's another tale of some kind of underdog who, against all odds, overcomes the adversity. And in a lot of ways, it's just a very simple vehicle for a comedy star in Rodney Dangerfield. But despite all of these generic elements in this script, there's still a lot to like about it. There's still a lot of things about this script that actually stand out to this day. And a lot of it is due to what Harold Ramis brought to the film. Thornton initially was going to be a poor man and then he was going to go to college. But Harold Ramis was like, how about he's a rich man? And that really is something that made this film stand out from some of these other sort of similar storylines and similar films. Because now you've got this rich man who has all this money, has this very successful clothing empire, tall and fat, and he gets the opportunity to go back to college because he's trying to cheer up his son because he finds out that his son isn't necessarily as happy as he's making himself look like he is through all the letters and all the phone calls he's made with his father. And so he decides to go to school with him, and now he's just using all of his money to bribe people, to bring over his crew from his corporation and have them do his homework, using his influence to get into the college in the first place because he doesn't have the credentials. But it's like, hey, he's got the money and he paid for a new business administration building, so he can go to school here. And so, of course, throughout the film, he's just trying to use his money to get the results that he wants. But ultimately, he finds out that that's not going to work because people realize that he's plagiarizing other people's work or what's going on in terms of the papers that are being turned in. They're not really his because they don't really align with the previous papers that he was turning in. And of course, there's also, like I said, there's a love story in there too, between Thornton and the English teacher, Dr. Turner. There's also a love story going on between Jason and his childhood crush and Valerie. And there's also stuff going on with Jason Mellon and this bully who is like captain of the swim team, and Jason wants to be a part of the swim team but he's stuck as a towel boy, and the bully is Chaz. His name is even Chaz, by the way. And so there's a lot of things about this script that's it's very generic. You've got a antagonist who's this snooty upper crust Englishman who is the teacher of the economics class who doesn't respect and doesn't feel like Thornton deserves to be here, so he's trying to do everything he can to get him out of college. That ultimately leads to a oral exam where Thornton has to prove that he knows the subjects, and he does that by studying in a montage with his son, and with the English teacher, and cramming, and so there's a lot of stuff when it comes to this plot that is pretty predictable. But a lot of the fun is just how Thornton he how far he goes when it comes to using his money and his influence. Like, he is supposed to write a paper about Kurt Vonnegut, and so he actually hires Kurt Vonnegut to write the paper, and then his English teacher gives the paper an F because it's clearly not his work, and he then calls up Kurt Vonnegut and cusses him out over the phone. And there's a lot of fun stuff like that throughout the film in terms of how Thornton uses his money. Like, his dorm room is like this really ritzy, fancy, cool apartment. He throws this party that actually has Oingo Boingo as the band playing Dead Man's Party. And he's also not only able to flaunt, his money and his influence in that way, he's also able to use it to trick people. Like, when he's at first is getting ready to sign up for classes, he sets it up where his his chauffeur and bodyguard, holds up a sign that says Bruce Springsteen in front of a limo, which is his limo, so he could distract the students so he can not have to worry about a line. So there's a lot of fun stuff like that that's very creative, and would not be possible without uh, Thornton being a rich man going back to college. And of course, there's some drama involving his son Jason, and how he ultimately feels like his father is just using his money and his influence to get Jason what he wants. So when he does ultimately get added to the swim team, he assumes that his father just bought his way onto the team. And so he gets drunk and gets moody. But then, of course, you find out later on that that really wasn't the case. There's something that happens with Thornton and this new potential love interest of his, which is the teacher, Dr. Turner, where she sees him playing around with some girls in a jacuzzi at the party. And so they have a falling out. Speaking of falling out, there's actually a very big falling out that essentially opens up the film between Thornton and his then wife, Vanessa. And I like the way that the writers wrote this whole stuff, because he's so out of place when it comes to Vanessa throwing these big parties with all of these hors d'oeuvres and all these rich clients, and here he is, he's just wanting a beer, and he can't even get a beer except from the fridge. So he goes and grabs a beer from the fridge, goes in and makes a sandwich out of hors d'oeuvres, and then, he's insulting the guests in typical Rodney Dangerfield fashion. And it's offends the hoity-toity rich elites, and he then walks in on his, at the time, wife banging another dude. And so then he was like, all right, I'm done, I'm through, I'm why am I even continuing with this? This is my house, this is my money, I'm gonna get a divorce. So then he gets a divorce, and there's no drama after that. He just gets a divorce, and it's like, he even has like photos of her too, because she's trying to like make it harder on him, and she's making threats, and he pulls out like all these Polaroids of her banging this other dude, and I'm like, that is smart. That's very clever, because there's a lot of scripts that might not really go there, and there's just a lot of clever, funny lines in this too. And I think a lot of them are probably improvised by Rodney, but some of them I bet are probably still in the script. And another bit of the fun is just the idea of this older man who's a comedian who is going back to college, and how his views on the world clash with his teachers, and also the different personalities of the faculty at the college. The hoity-toity, snooty economics professor, the carefree English teacher, the insane, unhinged history professor, Professor Turgerson. Um, and also, there's some stuff going on too with a swim meet thing going on. Like it's a swim competition, which actually is something that ties into Rodney's life, because Rodney was actually a swimmer. Like he actually did uh, compete in competitive diving, which I thought was honestly pretty interesting. And he never did the triple Lindy because that's not a real thing. But speaking of that, that was a fun addition to the script as well, the triple Lindy. And I liked that there's a bit of a redemptive arc for his son, Jason, during the swim meet, that essentially culminates the film. But I feel that having Jason's friend, Derek, essentially cheat, and that's why they're even in the position to win. I didn't really care for that. I think they should have written it better. Like they're not ahead, but they're keeping pace with the other team. And when Chaz pulls up with a cramp, and by the way, I would have Chaz actually have a legitimate cramp, not fake it. Then or maybe he like pulled a hamstring earlier and he's just trying to make a go of it, but he just can't anymore. They have to find a last minute replacement. That's when Thornton comes in, does a triple Lindy, they win. I like that setup better than what they went with. And speaking of stuff like that, I don't really care for a couple other things when it comes to this script. For the most part, like I said, it's generic, it's kind of cliched at points, but it still works fine because of the novelty of the concept and because of how creative it is in terms of how Thornton utilizes his wealth back at college, and how there's a lot of different spots for Rodney to improvise lines. But I don't think the hoity-toity, snooty economics professor Dr. Barbeau is really that interesting or really that compelling enough of an antagonist. He's very one note, and I honestly feel should have switched things around. Let's make Sam Kinison the villain. Let's take Paxton Whitehead and make him the history professor, or just make the history professor into just the snooty hoity-toity guy, and then Turgerson is the economics professor, and he has a serious problem with Melton because he tried to start a business himself and it failed, and that's why he's stuck teaching economics at this college and not being this successful businessman like Thornton. And he thinks Thornton's a fraud, and so he's trying to um, fail him and embarrass him, and just trying to expose him as the joke that he thinks that he is to everyone at the college. And there is a lot of stuff that happens where now it's this personal vendetta for Turgeson to get back at a Melton, and to show him who the real professional is. And Kinison is just so great at being so unhinged and so funny. Like he made Rodney crack in the scene that they did together, and I just wanted more of that. because the other guy, like, just the hoity-toity economics professor, just kind of boring to be honest. But with Sam Kinison, if you made that character the main villain and you had him feature more in the story and have more screen time and more meltdowns and just become this serious foe for Melton to have to deal with, that would be so much more fun. And also the entire sequence where he does the oral exam, I would make it so instead of Turgeson going first, goes last, and it's this montage of Thornton starting out really energetic and just nailing everything initially when it comes to each subject. But as he keeps going, he gets more and more tired and he gets slower, and his answers become slower. And before he is now having to deal with Turgeson, he actually is kind of coached along by the English professor, the girl that he's definitely starting to fall in love with, and Dr. Turner. And this is where Turgeson thinks he is going to end him, but of course, he somehow gives the right answer, and just having Sam Kinison just completely melt down at that moment would have been iconic. Like, you could have ended it with him, like, just admitting that he's correct, but then completely snapping and then, like, trying to strangle the dean, and then it would have just been really funny. Because the way that it's set up with the hoity-toity guy, Dr. Barberry or Dr. Barbe, it's not really that fun. It's just kind of bland. And I kind of feel the same way about what's going on between Jason and Chaz as well. But those are just things that I would have changed up, switched up, made a little different. And I think that would have made the film better. But I still like the movie. I still think the script, for the most part, is still pretty decent for what it is. The love stories do kind of go nowhere. I would have liked to maybe have a little bit better of a conclusion, maybe another party at the end, and you get to see the couples dancing or kissing or something like that. Have another song by Oingo Boingo. But there's a lot of other stuff that I do like. I like the stuff with the dean. I like Burt Young's character Lou. That's definitely something kind of unique. This chauffeur slash bodyguard that works for Thornton. I like Derek specifically because it's Robert Downey Jr. playing a role that is just so completely different than what you normally see him do or you have seen him do in the past, but it shows that he can play the quirky friend role rather well. Um and I think, the stuff with Jason and Valerie is sweet as well. Uh and so is some of the stuff between Thornton and Diane. So overall, it's 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 a fine script. It's not a really special script because I think it could have been better, but it's still good for what it is. And I think a lot of it really has to do with what Harold Ramis brought to the screenplay and what Rodney brought to the film in terms of a lot of his contributions to it. Because he improvised a lot of stuff in terms of the dialogue. And speaking of Rodney, might as well talk about the cast. Like, I think that's a serious strong suit for this film. I think it definitely features a really solid cast. You got Rodney Dangerfield as Thornton Mellon, and this is a character that I think if you had the wrong actor, this could really fall very flat. But Rodney was the perfect actor for this role because he does a great job playing a potential sort of underdog type, but also does a great job playing the guy who's, got it all, but he still doesn't have any respect. And he's just really good at his deadpan and at quipping and just doing it in a way that's so natural and so just hilarious. Like, he is really funny in this. One of the main reasons why I like the film is because of Rodney Dangerfield, because he's just so funny in this, and his lines and his put downs, they're so clever and witty. But Sally Kellerman is also good as Dr. Turner. I think she has some really excellent chemistry with Rodney. They make a nice couple. Burt Young, it's fun to see him play alongside Rodney and some of these other cast members and play a bit of a heavy character. Uh, Keith Gordon, um, he was fine, but his character, there wasn't a lot to him. But he did fine for what he was asked to do. I felt Robert Downey Jr. His character left more of an impression. It seemed like he had more fun stuff to do. Derek, Paxton Whitehead is Dr. Philip Barbeau. I mean, it's not a bad performance, but it's not really that strong of a character. Oh, he's a snooty, uptight British economics professor who doesn't like Rodney. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But I never loved to hate him. I was just very indifferent on that particular character and that performance. If you made it Sam Kinison, that would have been something that you would love to hate, and you would love every minute of it. And speaking of Sam, he was very memorable and laugh out loud hilarious as the unhinged Professor Turgeson, which is why Professor Turgeson should have been the antagonist the entire time. Because then you get more of those moments, not just two scenes. Terry Farrell, she was not only fine looking in this as Valerie, but she was also fine when it comes to her acting. Emmet Walsh, it was nice to see him as the coach of the swim team. Adrienne Barbeau, it's like she channeled Billy from Creepshow again as this just stone cold bitch, Vanessa. And she's just so good at playing those kind of roles. Like, I was like, oh, look, it's Billy again. I guess she survived the monster in the crate, and now she tricked Rodney Dangerfield and married him and is making his life miserable. Um, William Zabka, another typical bully performance by him, but he plays that role very well and effortlessly. Ned Beatty, he has a small bit part, but he makes the most out of it as the dean, who is just so oblivious and just so easily manipulated by Thornton because Thornton is just giving all of his money to college. Uh, you also have Robert Picardo, who plays Giorgio, the the guy who's banging his wife, Vanessa. You have Jason Hervey as a young Thornton in a flashback that opens up the film, which is a really intriguing bit of casting. I don't necessarily buy that Jason Hervey is a young Rodney Dangerfield, but okay, I guess. He's got the attitude at least. You got Kurt Vonnegut as himself in a cameo. You got Eddie McClurg from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. She plays Thornton's typist who fills in for Thornton at a certain point in the film. And then you got Danny Elfman who plays himself along with the rest of his band, Oingo Oingo Boingo. And so, yeah, it's a good cast. I just wanted more of Sam Kinison. Like, even if it meant that there was less of the stuff with Keith Gordon, Terry Farrell, and William Zabka, fine. It means more Sam Kinison and more scenes with him playing off of Rodney Dangerfield. Now, the cinematography by Thomas E. Ackerman is adequate for what it is, so is the editing by David Rawlins. But the score by Danny Elfman, I honestly don't really care for it that much. I like Danny Elfman, but this score sounds too similar to something for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I don't really think that kind of vibe fits with this movie for the most part. It works in like the Triple Lindy scene and a couple other moments, but there's a lot of other times where it's a little bit too madcap for this film and the tone of it. So I honestly would have maybe liked to have seen a different composer, who, you know, did a score that was a little bit more consistent and fit better with the overall film, and still have Oingo Boingo perform live at the party and do Dead Man's Party. Um, but speaking of songs in the soundtrack, there are other songs on the soundtrack, but they're not really that memorable. There's some really generic 80s pop song they use for like when they first arrive at school that's pretty forgettable. And there's some other stuff, but it's you know, Twist and Shout, but like I've never really was like a huge fan of that song. So I was like, "Oh, Twist and Shout again. Great." Seems like I've heard that song a million times. It's been used in a bunch of other comedies. The same year it was used in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Um, but there's a song that was going to be used in the film by Alice Cooper, but for whatever reason, they didn't decide to use it. And it's called The Great American Success Story. And it's a really good song. And it has lyrics that match this movie. So it was clearly intended to be a part of the soundtrack. And then for whatever reason, it just wasn't featured in the film. And I have no idea why. Because this movie is good, but it would be even better if you had Alice Cooper's song in the film. And that whole scene where they go back to school, or where you know where Thornton decides to go to college, have that song play during that scene instead of the generic song that they used. Um, but yeah, for the most part, I think there's a lot of things about this that work fairly well. Um, and I, I I can definitely see why a lot of people enjoy this, and a lot of people feel that this is an enduring a comedy classic, um, mainly due to what Rodney brings to it. But I do feel that it's lacking in some areas, and it's not. I'm not going to give this a failing grade, but this is like a B minus kind of comedy for me. It's not an A tier or an A plus, but it's firmly in the B grade for me. Um, this cover art though is an F. This is awful. Like this is an eyesore. This was sadly very common for a lot of MGM releases for a while. Just really bad, lazy, awful cover art. But yeah, I would say if you enjoy 80s comedies and for whatever reason you haven't seen this one yet, this is definitely one that's worth at least one look just for Rodney and how funny he is, and also Kinison when it comes to his cameo. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Back to School, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.